Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. With Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these edtech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 282, with Jennifer Lonchar, co-founder at AmbioEdu. If you're like me, you've been seeing them more and more out there in the higher ed space. I've been seeing them come across my feed a lot on LinkedIn, so it was really exciting for me to get the chance to talk with Jennifer, learn more about her story, and talk a little bit also about her involvement in the upcoming EduWeb Summit, as well as what her company, AmbioEdu, is doing in the performance TV space, helping higher ed institutions elevate their brands and bring them right into folks' living rooms or wherever they might find themselves and consuming content on various streaming platforms and things. So really interesting stuff, really helping institutions get more innovative with their kind of messaging and digital marketing presence. Please do enjoy this wonderful episode number 282 with Jennifer Lonchar. It's always a treat for me when I get the chance to talk with somebody who I've seen kind of filtering into my, these days primarily LinkedIn feeds. That's kind of been my weapon of choice these days. But somebody I see getting out there, talking about what they're doing really cool stuff. We have Jennifer with us here from AmbioEdu. You are kind of leading the charge there. If you want to kick us off just by briefly introducing yourself and your background, and then we'll get into exploring a little bit more in depth AmbioEdu, but then also involved with the EduWeb Summit. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But introduce yourself quickly for our audience here.
I'm Jennifer Lonchar. I'm the co-founder of AmbioEdu. So really brief, I've been in the higher ed marketing space now for about 17 years. I spent a good amount of my career, almost 14 years, working for Carnegie. Went off on my own here to start Ambio it'll be 2 years in October. I can't believe that already. But really looking to combine my passion and the knowledge that I have of this enrollment marketing space with performance television, which is what we're doing, which is now the latest up and coming thing, the new shiny toy, if you will.
Yeah, and I guess it is that thing where it's the new shiny kind of toy, but I think for anybody, it sort of makes a lot of sense. Like it's something that has become much more ubiquitous. I would say also like podcasting of just sort of these on-demand content delivery systems. Like how are we leveraging them to get messaging out? It is a little bit of sort of a specialized sort of avenue to pursue. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into explaining the work that you do, and I guess I'd be even curious as sort of a bridge and kind of segue from kind of your background, what inspired you to kind of set out on this journey 2 years ago, knowing that maybe you needed to kind of I presume, sort of focus a bit more on that versus being like, oh, we'll do that in addition to the dozen of other things that we'll do, to help spread the message of a client, So talk a little bit about, I guess, the genesis and more about the work that AmbioEdu does.
Yeah. So I always tell people this, that I feel like we go back in time. We're back in 2010 when digital marketing was fresh to higher education. And I was with Carnegie back then, and we were the first company to bring digital marketing to higher ed. And back then, digital marketing was exploding in, I call it, outside of our higher education bubble, I call it the real world of marketing. It was exploding in the real world, but, we are much slower to adapt things traditionally, and we take a little bit of time. We're late adopters. And so back then, bringing digital to higher ed was, it was like 20% of budgets were dedicated to digital marketing.
Mhm.
And so obviously higher ed followed lockstep. Now we're over 90% of budgets are dedicated to digital marketing. And we're repeating the same thing, and that's what's happening right now. Outside of higher education, streaming is where most marketers are moving their money. It's where they're going. And for us in higher ed, we've been very slow to adopt it, and it has been one of those kind of add-on features for most campaigns. But there's a reason behind it, because traditionally it's been a very fragmented market, and each of the different streaming providers out there, you have to go kind of individually, and even if you work with an agency, they typically have to go contract individually with the different providers, and you don't get any good data on the back end. So you can see usually like completion numbers of videos and impression numbers, but that's about it. So if I'm a higher ed marketer and that's the only data that I can get from a campaign, and my feet are being held to the fire for any dollar that I spent, and how, what does my ROI look like on that, I'm not going to invest a lot of money in that space. So what we've done is we have a platform that is basically, we've taken all the providers, we've pulled them into one place, giving us the ability to target and optimize just like we would with digital marketing. And it's built on AI in the background. So the longer the campaign runs, the better it gets. The AI goes out and finds people based on their behaviors, based their interests, where they're watching TV. So it really becomes less about channel, more about audience and behavior, just like digital. And then the other big thing that we're doing, and this is why, I felt like it was imperative to bring it to higher ed, is that we are able to actually measure those results on the back end. So we can see when someone is exposed to a commercial, where are they going on your site? What are they doing after they see the commercial? How long is it taking them? And then we can actually measure that enrollment attribution all the way down to the student. So we can say to you, yes, we know Jennifer Lonchar came to the website, was exposed, or saw your commercial, went to your website and took an action with 100% certainty. And when you bring that to higher ed, and when you say, I can give you the magic of television and the brand of the magic that TV does to people, it makes people feel something. I can give you this 30 seconds of unskippable spotlight for your school to be on in the living room of the student, and I can measure whether that person saw it and it drove them to take an action. They're like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. It just took a little bit of convincing by my business partners. It took them really trying to convince me, over a year and a half of them saying, you can do this, you can do this. And, going off on your own is very daunting. And so it was like jumping off of a cliff. And finally, one day I was like, all right, let's talk about this. What does this look like? So it was not a decision that was made lightly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's always a thing of like, like the truth of it is like an overnight success, years in the making kind of thing. It's like, I got to this eventually. It wasn't just like I had a light bulb moment and like, maybe I'm gonna start my own company. Started it the next day. It's just gangbusters and whatever else. It's like, you were thinking about it, you worked on it. And I even think like, because I think like higher ed, yeah, the sort of slow to adopt thing, because I would even like describe myself this way. It's like, I'm not like an early adopter with a lot of stuff. I wanted to sort of like mature to a point or kind of like work out the kinks. And it is that idea that like we're at the point of maturation, with streaming and, everything that's happening there of like, yeah, like audience optimization, the tracking, and like just everything is going to work better together now than years ago when sort of it was still in its kind of nascent stages of people just kind of catching on, and even just like the proliferation of all the different kind of streaming platforms. So like, yeah, like I think it's that idea of even just sort of like the acknowledgement of it, but even just sort of the understanding of why higher ed sort of like is primed in this moment for like what you're doing and more receptive maybe now than they would have been, in years prior.
Well, and that actually is what you say is really interesting, because you talk about all the different, digital platforms that are out there. And I think that's another thing that I think is really important, is that, I got to a point with clients, and this was over the past, I think 4 or 5 years, where I would go to a client and meet with them and say, they'd say, our digital campaigns just aren't performing at the same level that they were performing. And when you would dig into everything, on the back end, you're doing everything right. When your team is running the campaign correctly, you're doing everything right. And the answer always would be, well, you need to invest more. You need to spend more money. And why is that? Well, at the beginning, it was very easy to stand out from a crowd with digital because not a lot of people were doing it. It is a very, very crowded space right now. I mean, especially in higher ed. And so and when you are targeting these students, everyone's doing list-based targeting and things like that, and they're just getting bombarded with display ads and social ads and everything in their feed. How do you stand out from the crowd? And so I kept saying there has to be a better answer than spend more. And so this is really like such a different space that there is so much inventory available. There's so many chances for schools to really stand out and do something different. Now, I am not an advocate. I'm not going to sit here and say, stop doing all the rest of your digital marketing, because that's not the answer. And this is also not going to be the silver bullet that's going to solve all your problems. I would never tell anyone that. And in fact, we are a full service digital agency. I purposely don't put myself out there as that because I also don't want to get lumped in with everybody else as, oh, she's just another agency. We are streaming first, 100%. I do feel that streaming, whether it is CTV/OTT or it's in-stream video or it's video first social content, that's where they're going and that's where they're at. But that gives schools really the ability to start standing out. So again, we're back where we were 13 years ago and trying to make an impression in a very crowded market. And it's working.
Yeah, and I guess it's even interesting with what I'm saying, like that idea of higher ed holistically, kind of writ large, being maybe at the sort of like midstream or even late adopters sometimes, but even within that, there's going to be the ones who are sort of, pushing that innovative edge of something like this. Digital advertising channels right now are so crowded. So it's like that idea of it's forcing like you need to be doing it like at a super high level, both like how much you're spending and like how sort of like top quality it is. Because if it's just sort of like, low spend, low quality, whatever, you're just going to get kind of lost in the noise and, whatever else. So I think, yeah, that idea of being able to, pivot, and even like the idea of being like, you've got a great message and all that. It's like, it's just getting lost in the noise. You just need to kind of like look out for wider open pastures, and just, make that sort of adjustment. So it's really great to see. And I think, I'd mentioned, we'll kind of talk about the upcoming EduWeb Summit here. I think just an avenue and an opportunity to, connect with folks and talk more about all this stuff coming up. So, it's coming up July 15th through 17th in Portland, Maine, a place I love. I'm looking forward to being there. It's my first EduWeb Summit. So really looking forward to just being in that space and connecting with folks. But I guess for you in particular, maybe bringing this sort of, messaging, is opportunity, this sort of story, the journey that you're on with AmbioEdu, like what's coming to mind, I guess, of just what you're looking forward to with the upcoming summit, if there's particular sessions or speakers or just anything that's kind of on your mind of what you're looking forward to.
Well, EduWeb is a great conference because it's different than most conferences because it's growing, which is great. We love to see that, right? It's getting bigger. I think even, years ago, it was a very small conference. Last year was so well attended, but it doesn't feel like a big conference. It still feels very small. Like it feels small, and you feel like you have the opportunity to really talk to people and really ask them, sit down with people and have good conversations. And we, on the, being part of the planning committee, we purposely try to come up with new and different ways to get people to engage with each other, right? To purposely get them to start talking. And I think we learn so well. And the one thing that I really, really love about our industry, about higher ed in general, is that we do share. We share our knowledge, which is surprising. We are in a very competitive industry, but we do share. We share ideas. We share what's worked for us. And so, we purposely get people talking when they're sitting at tables, share ideas. We come up with great topic ideas for them to talk about. We do this great opening session, and I think we're probably going to do something similar again this year, where we really open it up to discussion as opposed to just having a panel of knowledgeable people talking at you. And sometimes when that happens, you're like, oh yeah, this is the same thing I heard at this conference, or the same thing I heard at this conference. But, really opening it up and asking people, like, what are the challenges that you're faced with? What are you running into on a day-to-day basis? And in this great room of talented individuals, surely there's someone in here who's run into that before and has and can help you with that, right? And so connecting, it's all about networking, it's about connecting people, it's about inspiring conversations, learning about what's new and different out there, what's working, where people have had success. Yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. And I mean, it's in Maine this year, which, that's awesome.
Yeah. That's always, I need to like try to find some way to do like some sort of like research of like conferences and everything else. Cause like location matters, obviously, because it's obviously easier for people, local to go. But then like the idea of like, oh my gosh, Portland in July, like, Maine in July is like perfect. That idea of just like, there's obviously a lot of moving pieces of like where and when do we do any of these kind of things. But like, it could be like, okay, all things being equal, yeah, if you're going to do a conference in Maine in July, I'm sure it's probably going to be pretty well attended. And like,
Yeah.
that's why I want to do some sort of research. You'd have to like control for so many different variables or whatever. But um, yeah, I mean, it is something where like, EduWeb is something I've observed from afar for a while. So I'm really excited for this opportunity. I mean, just in general, any opportunity to kind of be in community, sort of a remote working, independent kind of ill fitting. Like, I don't feel like I've solely fit into like, oh, I'm a, orientation person. I go to the orientation conference or whatever else. So like, even just exploring and getting out as much as I can to be in kind of these spaces is always exciting. And then, yeah, chances to kind of be a part of something that I've kind of observed for a while. So really looking forward to it. And
I'll also say this really quick. Being on the planning committee, I appreciate this conference very much because most conferences, now I'm coming from the partner slash vendor side of things, right? And let's face it, most of the conferences that are out there, they all cater to the higher ed professionals that are on the school side. And so usually as a vendor, we're the ones that we pay this money, we have a table, we have a booth, you come to us, we talk to you about our product. Great, fine. We'll give sponsorships and do whatever to try to, get our product or our service in front of people. What I appreciate about EduWeb is that having been part of this planning committee last year and this year, the planning committee is made up of not only professionals from schools, but also there are some partner vendors that are in there as well, which it gives us an opportunity to give a perspective from our side about, what, sometimes these conferences, this is how you could do it a little bit better from the vendor perspective, because we're usually the outsiders kind of watching from the periphery. And we do have a lot of really good input. And not all of us are just trying to benefit, just ourselves. We want the industry as a whole to survive. We want the industry to be better. We want these schools to be bringing in students and stuff. And so the fact that they allow vendors on and take into account the years of professional service that we've had and the expertise that we bring to the table, and they really listen to us. The other thing is that Allison Tercio, she's like our gang leader of the panel, but she's fantastic. She's just keeps everybody on task. She keeps things moving forward. She's the utmost professional. She's so knowledgeable in what she does, and so it's really fun to be working with her to help plan this out.
well, appreciate the shout out to fellow Enrollify host Allison Tercio, and yeah, and I think that's like something too, is that like there's people like her and a lot of some of the other creators, or like, certainly a lot of the guests that we've all had across our shows that are like deeply involved with EduWeb or always are at. So I'm like always having the like FOMO, with these kind of events and stuff. Where I'm just like, I got to get there somehow, and yeah, this year's the year. And I know the other thing I'm just making mention of too is I think is a great part of it is the AI studio. I know we're talking about it a lot on this show and across all of our shows. It's just like, making kind of deliberate space for those kind of conversations where I think you're seeing some, events really embracing it wholeheartedly. But then even with what EduWeb is doing, I think making some kind of dedicated space for those kind of conversations and explorations, because I think we're all, in our varied stages of, acclimating to that of, early adopters and late adopters and all that kind of cool stuff. So, yeah, hope to see folks there, and appreciate you. Yeah, appreciate EduWeb for, like you're saying, like bringing you in and kind of collaborating. Because I think, the events and organizations that can kind of thread that needle of finding that right balance of like, the kind of external partners to institutions and the institutional leaders kind of coming together. Like that's what I always love is, having those sort of intersection points and everything. So, yeah, so I think with all of that, I'm sure some of what you may be discussing with folks at the EduWeb Summit, and I'm sure in addition to just other places and spaces, but like I was curious, misconceptions with performance TV marketing and everything. It's new to this sort of space. I'm sure you might have to kind of dissuade some misguided notions and things like that. And I know the biggest one that I thought of, and I think this is like an important sort of distinguishing thing, is like the idea of skippability. There's a difference between if you're marketing on somewhere like YouTube or if you're marketing on, some other sort of streaming platform. So can you talk about that, of just sort of like the nature of like how someone sort of is getting this messaging and how they sort of engage with it?
Sure. And this is perfect because I literally just got off of a call right before this podcast where it's a new client, and they said, well, we were talking to some of our board members about this because they're going to give us, some money to try this out because it's a lot of it is a new concept for people. And they said, well, they wanted to know why you were pushing 30-second ads. And they were saying that they thought 15-second ads were better. And can you tell me about that? And I said, well, I can guarantee you that they're coming from the perspective that we've all been used to, where we might be watching something on YouTube and this intrusive ad comes up in the middle of what you're watching and you have to watch it for 5 seconds and then you skip it, right? Or it's only 15 seconds long. And so it doesn't take much time and then you can go back to watching your show. But that's not what this is. And you really, in 15 seconds, you really can't say a lot in 15 seconds. It would be like a branding. Boop, here's your school, flyover, tagline, that's it. But in 30 seconds, so most performance TV, we call them pods of commercials and that are shown. They're shown in pods, usually of 3. They're usually about a minute and a half total, so 30 seconds each. And you usually get a little timer that comes up or a little thing down in the corner that shows when that commercial is going to be over. But these are unskippable. And 30-second, you can do 15-second ones, but 30 seconds is the sweet spot for 2 reasons. One, there's a ton of inventory out there, 30-second inventory. And 30 seconds seems to be the right amount of time to say. You can say a lot in 30 seconds that you can't say in a social ad or you can't say in a static display ad. And a lot of times people will skip those short videos that come up in pre-roll and things like that. They can't skip these ads. They come up, you're watching White Lotus, you're binging it, right? And this ad comes up. You use ad supported. So you're using the free streaming platform. The ad comes up, 30 seconds. You can say a lot in 30 seconds to someone. You can use that time to speak from a student's perspective about what this university did for them. It's not necessarily screaming taglines. I say screaming taglines into a void. It is telling a story. Who are you? What are you going to do for the student? And even if they mute it, and so this is another thing that I tell people too, with these commercials, again, you want to have good graphic overlay on the top because a lot of people mute the commercials. That's their behavior. And then you also want to have really good voiceover throughout that tells the story, because if someone gets up and walks away, gets a drink in the kitchen or does whatever, they can still hear what's happening in the background. But this is the first time that schools really have the opportunity to have this unskippable 30 seconds where you're in their face. And I liken it to, what would you say to a student if they gave you 30 seconds and said, come into my living room. My parents are sitting here with me on the couch and I'm giving you 30 seconds to win me over. What are you going to say? And then when you ask people that question, they really do have to think about it for a second. Like, what would I say in 30 seconds? And would you use that opportunity to talk about your 12-to-1 student teacher ratio? Or would you talk about your 57 majors or whatever? No, you probably wouldn't say that to them. You would say, we can change your life. The school will change your life. You'll have experiences like you've never had before. You'll meet your friends of a lifetime, all of those things. So it is unlike any other opportunity. And time again, we see it working. We just did a match back for a client the other day. And again, before I tell you that, one of the biggest misconceptions too out there is that this is just a branding tool. Like it's just for branding, because that's really all it's ever been used for. But it is an enrollment tool. And we just did a match back for a client. And when I say match back, I mean, they basically sent us a list of all their admitted students, the home addresses of those students. And we were able to match that back to our exposure records and to tell them that, yes, we know for certain 78% of your admitted students were exposed to our commercials and then went to your website and took an action. So that 78% is not a made up number. That literally was just a client we did a match back for. And we had another one that we just matched back about 89% of their applicants who were exposed. I don't know any other marketing where you can give that level of confidence behind that ROI to say, yes, this marketing that you're putting money into is driving enrollment for you.
Hey folks, it's Dustin. Quick break for anyone thinking about what AI really means for higher ed. The next step isn't smarter tools, it's a smarter team. Imagine support that never sleeps, that helps in 100 languages, answers at midnight, follow ups before morning. That's what a digital workforce brings to higher ed, and it's already happening with Bolt agents from Element 451. Come see it live at the Engage Summit this June. Register at enrollify.org/engage and use code ENGAGE50 to get $50 off your ticket. Now, back to the show. Yeah, that is really powerful. And I think there's obviously the visual component to it. It's not required. It elevates it of like, if you're seeing the person talking, like, it changed my life. Here's my story. That's great. You don't have to be watching. Like, you could just hear, and that's compelling enough. And then, like, the time, people are like, that's palatable to people. They expect that. They understand that. And so I think, yeah, there's a lot of aspects where it is that even just across the board for like a lot of, digital marketing stuff of we're getting better at sort of like optimizing or sort of like the full potential of like, okay, this is sort of like the sandbox I have to play in. I can really kind of, build towards that, but then not having to really chase these sort of like algorithms or sort of the obfuscation that comes with like a lot of the other platforms. Like, just make a 30-second video that's really compelling, and if you do these things, it's going to make it like kind of fully optimized of it's not solely a visual that if you're not looking at it, it doesn't make any sense, or the visual doesn't matter, and then it's kind of like, well, I mean, I don't know, like if it needed to be this video ad, you do a podcast ad or something, I don't know, but then even that idea of like that non-skippable thing, and that people are almost like accepting and expecting it. It's like, I know what I'm paying for. I'm paying for the ad tier of like,
Exactly.
Netflix or whatever. So like, yeah, I'm going to get ads. Like I know, and other things. It is an idea of like, it's intrusive. People kind of like really don't want it, or are more in the habit of just like waiting for the skip up, button to pop up and all that. So what you're saying there of like really tracking them kind of through the funnel and knowing, kind of that clear impact that these ads are making and everything. And even like the emotional aspect, I think, is an interesting piece of this, because I think as much as we expect, in many ways for anybody to be these like completely rational economic actors and whatever, they're making choices of like, I want the cheapest degree that I can get the fastest, whatever else, it's emotional, that idea of like changing your life and all that. Like there are very specific kind of mechanisms that are going to enable that person to change their life. But I think this type of promotion, I feel like, is super well suited to higher recruitment, like on kind of both fronts, of like technical basis of what you're saying of like tracking, but then also like the ability to kind of convey more often is that emotional sort of message and everything. Like, can you just expand on that of like how you see this type of promotion as really well suited for higher ed recruitment? Because I feel like it's maybe like both of those sides of the coin, I guess, is what I'm kind of getting.
I mean, I think the big thing is when you look at, and there have been studies that have been done, like Comcast has done numerous studies around the effectiveness of TV ads. And there is a reason that TV's been around as long as it has, and that commercials have been around as long as they have. But it's changed, right? It used to be where everybody got the same commercials because we were all watching the same thing at specific times. Well, now you can stream on any channel pretty much any time of the day. And so what I want to say is this, is that, one thing to remember, to understand. And I think when I first started talking about this with my business partners, the idea that our TVs have become just another digital device in our life. You can't buy a TV that's not a smart TV anymore. And as soon as you plug your TV, let's say you go to Costco, you buy a new TV, you bring it home, you plug it in, the very first thing it asks you to do is connect to the network. And as soon as you connect to your Wi-Fi network, your TV now is connected to your phone, to your tablet, to your computers, to everything other devices in your household, which means just like with digital marketing, everything you're searching online and everything you're looking at and all of your behaviors that are already being tracked, and we say it's creepy, but we all know what's happening, right?
Right.
All of those things that you're doing now affect the commercials that you see in your house. So I guarantee you, commercials you see in your house are different than the commercials you're seeing in your neighbor's house and your other neighbor's house over here. And so when you combine that with the effectiveness of TV advertising, and video influence lasts twice as long as non-video influence. So most people, when we look at our client reports, on average, the completion rate for commercials is around 98% because the only way that they can get out of that commercial is turning the channel or turning off the TV, and it just doesn't happen. So they're watching the whole thing. They're watching it. And when you have a digital ad, that compared to like only 30% when people are watching because they're skipping it, right? And so the other thing that it does is the memory recall that TV creates. And so I think as a school, if you're thinking, I want a student to remember me, right, then this is what you want them to see. The memory recall on TV is about 3.5 times greater than any other channel out there. That's a lot, especially when you're looking at students who have an attention span. I mean, it used to be 8 seconds. I think it's less than that now.
Mhm.
So you want them to remember you, right? And so it is the ideal tool for higher ed, and not just enrollment. I mean, think about for advancement purposes and fundraising. I mean, you've got alumni lists that you own, right? You know who to target, you know what you want to say. This university gave to you, give back to us. I mean, there is no greater tool than putting that right into the homes of your alumni. So there are a lot of use cases for it as well. And again, it's, when I started this, I knew anecdotally it was going to work just from years and years of experience and knowing our audience and knowing what we're doing and knowing how precise we are on the back end with targeting, and now having the ability to have AI built into our platform that really optimizes and really will go out and find that audience. I knew it was going to work anecdotally. I just didn't know that it was going to work as well as it is working. Like, I am over the moon. Happy with the results. The first time we got our matchback results from a client, the very first client I had, and those matchback results came in, and the whole time I was just sweating. I was like, please let this be as good as I'm hoping it. Please, 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 please. And it did. It just blew it out of the water. So, and each one continues to come in as good as the one before, if not better. So, yeah, we're really on to something here.
Well, yeah, and that's what I think is like, there always going to be those people who are like bleeding edge, like, kind of innovators or kind of all that kind of stuff. And it's like there is sort of value in sort of like meeting the moment, the idea like the reception and kind of the receptiveness to this, like you don't have to be like banging your head against the wall of just being like, please, like, trust me, I know what I'm talking about or whatever. It's like, there
Well,
is sort of an
I am.
appetite for like, and I guess, yeah, to an extent, it's like you always are going to have to do sort of that like convincing, but even the idea that like, there's kind of an appetite for like, yeah, we're not really getting the results that we're looking for from kind of our traditional kind of channels. And then just like, the ubiquity of like streaming where everybody's like, oh yeah, yeah, I've kind of seen like, so there's just kind of like that idea of like, okay, I just need to bring those kind of forces together and do that with like a deft hand and understanding of like, what you have of like, an understanding of kind of the marketplace, how people make decisions in higher ed and all that. And like, and to me, what I was sort of like thinking of when you were talking is the idea of like, you were talking about like that recall and stuff is like, higher ed is also unique for, the idea of prospective students and everything. Like they can be taking a long time to kind of make a decision. Like obviously it is like, as much as it is like an emotional one, it's not often a knee-jerk one. Like it's, big investment of time and money and everything else. So like people approach it like they're buying a house or a car or something, like they're going to be like more likely than not taking a long time. So even just that idea of like being out there, being prominent, being in the market and having sort of a mechanism that is hopefully going to have them be able to like have a bit more of like a recall as they're like sitting and kind of marinating on like, where is it that I want to study? What modality? Like what kind of program? Like all that, like they're gonna be thinking about a lot of things. So it's kind of like, yeah, let's just like let this kind of sit and simmer and then just but the idea of being able to like at the end of the day know, different recruitment cycles, whatever else, like in some shape or form at some point, like they saw this, they engaged with it, it helped to kind of like move them down the line of, knowing that this was going to be, the choice that they're ultimately going to make to, apply and accept and start and all that kind of stuff. So that was just something that was kind of in my head. It's just like, yeah, even like the time horizon of this sort of like, works a little bit better maybe than, it might, in other avenues.
Well, and also you bring to point, there's a lot that happens on the content development side, especially on like the grad side of things, right? That's a very different audience. So first and foremost, you know, I think what I'm running into a lot too is that anybody that's also has tried dipping their toe in the water with CTV OTT has probably done it with an outside agency that isn't dedicated to higher ed. And again, what you just said is this is a life decision. They're making a really big decision. This is not buying a pair of shoes. This is not, buying the farmer's dog food for your pet. I mean, not that that's not a big decision. It is, but you get what I'm saying. And so understanding how these students work and what marketing works with them, the frequency of times they need to see messages, it needs to be kind of that right mix of everything. And whether it's a graduate audience or an undergrad audience, those two audiences are so vastly different, especially in the way that their time frames of everything. Undergrad, we're so locked into a certain time frame, so exactly, what months of the year you need to be doing what message. Where grad, it's like, we did a 3-month campaign for a client, and at the end of that 3-month campaign, and this was specifically for grad, we matched back about 25% of their applicants, right? And then after 6 months of running that campaign, we matched back 55% of their applicants, right? That just goes along with exactly what we know about these students. They take a long time to make a decision. So I'll be anxious, to match back things after, a year and see what happens there. So yeah, I think that's another big thing too. And the one thing I'll say in kind of what you touched on is, don't be afraid of innovation, and don't be afraid, because I do feel like sometimes I'm banging my head against the wall. And so I'm very much appreciative of these opportunities to do these podcasts and things, because I just need people to listen. And if they don't know what they don't know, and if they just take 5 minutes to listen, I can't even tell you how many calls I've gotten off. Like, I'm on the call with people and they're like, wow, this is way more than what I thought it was going to be. I mean, it happens all the time. And I'm like, okay, my mind is a little bit blown right now. I didn't expect this at all. And I'm like, this is what I'm saying. So this is something new. It's something great. But on the back end, it also is built on something that's tried and true, right? So we're not reinventing the wheel per se.
Yeah, and that's kind of the note, yeah, as we're wrapping up, is just like, advice that you would have. And I think even, you're kind of already alluding to that, but I think it is that idea of, this moment where this isn't like this like novelty thing. 'Cause I think that's even part of it. Is sometimes I think if you're at very early stages, it's like you maybe can't pitch or sell to somebody being like, hey, put your whole marketing budget into, streaming ads, whatever. Like, it might feel like, well, if you even just put a portion into it, we don't have like case studies, really anything to justify it, but it's like this new thing. So if you want to like dabble, we can kind of just like, but it is that like you could kind of start to like really kind of move your ship in the direction. And, certainly anybody has to kind of start somewhere, and they might still be starting small, but like it is that idea of at least recognizing like, trend lines and where things are going, and being like, okay, when do we want to jump in? It's almost not like, yeah, I think we're going to be getting to a point soon where it's not a matter of like, oh, we're not doing that. Cause like, again, like you were saying, like if you think back many years, people would be like, oh, we're not doing that digital marketing thing. But like now people would be like, what? You're not doing anything or whatever, like, and again, there's always going to be, the late adopters, and, the water's fine, jump in when you're ready. But like, it is at least that idea of, I always appreciate, being able to give a platform and just make sure that people are aware about like the great new different things that are happening, to just like, diversify your approach. And, I appreciate you even mentioning this, like, certainly to student recruitment, but for any sort of messaging and outreach that you're doing, like it could even be that you're just trying to kind of like, you've got budget to do kind of the town and gown, just sort of like brand awareness. Like we just want people to know who we are, what we do, and, value us, as a trusted, committed community partner to our local area or something. Or it could be for, yeah, an alumni giving day or something. We're going to do a push, and we're going to, move all the levers that we can. There's just an opportunity here, whichever way you sort of pursue it, just an acknowledgement of it, and just sort of a consideration of just the how, not like, whether we are or aren't. It's like, I think increasingly going to be just like, we're going to do it. Which way do we want to do it? Do we want to do it all the above, or just the alumni giving day, or just the student recruitment, or, like that idea that like, this is a channel that we need to be embracing, somehow, some way. So with all that being said, I'll give you the final word of just sort of like, in that sort of mindset, or kind of whatever kind of final thoughts, advice, parting words that you would like to give to our audience. The floor is yours.
I would just say my advice to schools would be to embrace innovation that's out there and really try to stay ahead of the curve, because we have historically been slow to adopt new technologies, really until our feet are held to the fire. But I think we're in a really important time right now where digital tools like performance TV, AI recruiters and things like that are really transforming the way that we've traditionally done recruitment. And I think that schools need to not be scared to experiment with some new channels, and measure the outcomes on the back end. And I think that, by staying open to that, you can better meet the needs of these new prospective students. And I will tell you this, we have 100% renewal rate with our clients, which is pretty outstanding, especially with a new business in the first 2 years. But most of them have started small, doing a test campaign, saying, okay, let's test this out. We don't know what's going on. And then let's measure those results afterwards. And every single one has come back and said, holy cow, this is more than what we thought it was. And we want to continue. We can't imagine not doing this anymore. So I would just say, when you go to big conferences, whether it's EduWeb or whether it's AMA or whether it's NACAC or ACRO or wherever you're going, there are the big companies that everybody knows that typically have their booths in the front of the conference hall, their big booths, whatever. And a lot of people stop there. They walk in, they stop, and they don't go any farther. I would say, and this is not just for me, but there are a lot of really cool small companies out there that are doing some really awesome stuff in higher ed right now that you should just listen to. And just take the time to listen, walk around, tell them, I might not be in the market right now for this, but I just want to hear what you're doing. Tell me so that when I am ready, I know where I can go. So what I would say is that if you go to a conference, whether it's EduWeb or whether it's AMA or if it's NACAC or ACRO or whatever conference you're going to, don't just stop at the big booths at the front. Walk, or the ones that you have heard of over the years. I would say take the time to walk around. And if there's vendors you've never heard of before, just stop for 5 minutes and ask them what they do, have them explain their business to you, because if you don't, you're missing out on a lot of really cool innovation that's happening in higher education right now. And I can tell you, because I do talk to a lot of other companies, because I want to know what's going on out there. And if there's other companies that are doing things that can complement what we're doing, or we can complement them in some way, there are some awesome opportunities for schools to try new and different tools that are really going to help them make grounds, especially in this very competitive market that we're in and the time we have right now with the enrollment cliff, the perception cliff, like all the things that we're up against.
Yeah, I mean, it's good advice, like just generally the sort of like openness to innovation. And then like that idea of like in a way to find out the innovative things happening is like walk the whole show floor, which is something I'd love to do. Is just, it sort of like helps me as like a podcaster. Like it's like, I'll do these interviews with people, but even just sort of like bumping into people and kind of having those like kind of chit chat things, it could be like, wow, there's a lot of people like doing this sort of thing, but like different flavors of it or, whatever else. So that is good advice in general, certainly for EduWeb coming up, but then, whatever conference you might find yourself at. And just, I think this is a moment where, if you look at sort of the challenges of the things that you kind of like listed out as opportunities to sort of like, how can we sort of try to circumvent everything that's sort of, all these headwinds coming our way, it is likely not just to continue doing what you were doing before in the same way you were doing or whatever else. Like start somewhere. Like that is a line that I say on the show, like all the time, is like start somewhere to then sort of like start kind of carving out that trail and a new path to then kind of circumvent, rather than just like, grit and bearing it and pushing against that headwind. It's like, try to get around it. And then you'd be like, wow, hey, look at that. Like it doesn't have to be so hard. So, so I appreciate all that you're doing, the great work you're doing, and being on the show, sharing all that you did. We'll have ways to connect with you and AmbioEdu and the EduWeb Summit in the description for this episode. So look forward to seeing you in Portland in July. And thank you again for just coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Dustin. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to see you at EduWeb. EduWeb is an awesome conference. If you're listening to this, you should go register right now.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.